Good evening to all. Surya Prakash has been very passionate about the necessity to recall emergency and retell the story, because we have very short memories of wrong things that happen. Therefore, wrong things keep happening in this country. A society which undergoes a certain experience, in just 30, 40 years back, if it forgets that, it will not be able to recall what happened 400 years ago. And so the history will keep repeating. So this time he told me that you should come and join in Vivekananda International Foundation. The story of emergency must again be retold, so that the horrendous experience this country underwent at that time. And I was a volunteer of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, underground at that time, fighting the emergency. So I personally underwent what very ordinary families experienced at that time. People were arrested. They didn't have rations. I was asked to go underground to give ration supplies to 300 families of people who had been detained. We used to go and beg 10 rupees, 15 rupees, 20 rupees. Because by the end of the day, we need money for the next day's ration to be given to those people. And not many people would entertain us. In fact, whenever I developed a distaste for cricket, being a great lover of cricket during the emergency. Because when we went to people, they will be holding the transistor and saying how great Gavaskar's 6 was or 4 was. But when the whole country was burning, it was meaning nothing to them. That 100,000 people have been arrested and all fundamental rights have been suspended. There is no civilization or civilizational values which we boast of today before the international community, that we are a great democracy with such divergencies and diversities. We are a great democracy which we are boasting today had been crushed and buried 100 fathoms deep. But our elites, our intellectuals, our professionals, our lawyers, our judges, our civil servants, they were all happy. For them, trains were running on time. There is discipline in the society. You know, we were all so shaken at that time that every day was a problem. I had personally borrowed at that time, my salary was 900 rupees. I had borrowed 20,000 rupees. Of course, many others like that did. At interest of 18%. Just to ensure that ration supplies will be there for those families. So in this situation, what is going to happen? And everybody seems to be happy with the dispensation that was going on. So in Chennai, we organized a civil liberties conference under the aegis of Citizens for Democracy, founded by Jayaprakash Narayan. So in that we had invited Cho Ramaswamy, one of the, of course, most popular persons who fought the emergency tooth and nail through his magazine called the Tughlaq. And then we had called Justice K.S. Hegde, and Cherian and others were there, Ira Cherian, whose speech against the emergency is, in fact, we have printed it in hundreds of thousands of copies as underground literature and distributed. Even the parliamentary speech could not be printed by newspapers. As he already said, the privilege of printing the parliamentary proceedings was withdrawn for the newspapers. So we used to print it as underground newspapers and distribute it. So we when held the Civil Liberties Conference in that hall, 9 o'clock was the start of the meeting. At 8:55, there was nobody in that hall. But when Cho Ramaswamy entered the hall, we found suddenly people from all around barged into the hall because they were afraid of coming alone because of the presence of the police. Who is coming? Who is not coming? They are being watched. That was the extent of fear to attend even a public meeting to listen to people who are beyond reproach, who are great people. So after the meeting was over, then the policeman had threatened us that we are all going to put you under Misa. But when the hall overflowed and the spirit of the meeting was so high, the police didn't do anything. I'm going to relate a beautiful incident which made us keep working, actually. So, at about 9 o'clock in the night, we all met Justice Hegde in a hotel. And about 5-6 of us said, "Sir, where is the end to all this? We see complete darkness everywhere." Suddenly the lights went off. It was pitch dark. And there was a flame of the candle burning. That was only because the candle was there. Justice Hegde says, our job is like that of the candle. Keep the flame alive. This one advice kept us going for the next 12 months. It was that kind of repressive atmosphere. I am talking now, Surya Prakash spoke from the point of view of the media, what was happening, Shah Commission. But for people who worked at the ground level, printing underground pamphlets and taking it on cycle, and when you give it to a person, he throws it on your face, he doesn't want it. And I am a chartered accountant, I go to my client's office. They say, don't bring these materials to our office. This is complete. The country had accepted the emergency. Please don't think the country did not accept the emergency. At the educated people's level, at the intellectuals level, at the professionals level, at the level of the people who are not concerned with the country, emergency was a fait accompli. It is the ordinary Indian who threw the emergency out. So there is a beautiful cartoon which was carried in the Indian Express. There used to be a cartoonist by name Abu. He was a brilliant cartoonist. He used to use very few words. So after the emergency was over, after the Janata Party won, so Jayaprakash Narayan was sitting on the chair, the cartoon shows. And a Jat farmer smoking hookah was sitting below him. And he asked Jayaprakash, Loknaik, is the revolution total? It is he who threw the emergency, not the judges, not the parliamentarians, not the civil servants, not the President of India. If the President of India had refused to sign the declaration of emergency, there would have been no emergency. The man was not only willing to sign that, he was willing to sign any paper. So, actually, Abu again put a cartoon that Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad was in that bathroom having bathtub. And so somebody comes and says, this bill has to be signed, sir. And he signs it. This was the state of the country. This was the state of the administration. This was the state of great people. Where it all started. You must understand, emergency did not come in one day. The dictatorial tendency started when the Congress party was split by Mrs. Gandhi. In fact, Ramnath Goenka, with whom I used to move very closely and I became his advisor later, and because of it, a whole lot of opening took place in my mind about the country, its affairs. All my education took place because of my association with the Indian Express. He told me, he went to Mrs. Gandhi and told her, he was a congressman. He went to Mrs. Gandhi and told her, you have done a great injustice and risked the country in, no, I cannot explain, whichever ways you have risked this country, including the integrity of India. The Congress is needed to keep the country together. You have split that Congress. It's a great injustice to the country. See her answer. Goenka has recorded it actually. She said, Mr. Goenka, you can be my friend or my enemy. See how a dictator views. And emergency was to come years later. Then Mr. Goenka stood up and said, the choice is yours. He is the man who fought the emergency. The choice is yours. At that time, Mr. Goenka's business was in such high risk mode that no businessman would have risked a fight with a person, with a prime minister with these tendencies to crush her enemies like Ramnath Goenka did. And from that time onwards, it's a war between Ramnath Goenka and Indian Express on the one hand. In fact, the person who really started fighting Indira Gandhi was Ramnath Goenka, much before Jayaprakash Narayan ever joined the battle. I will give you, because I can talk about the institutional failures, but I must also tell you about how individuals responded. It is great individuals who transformed the situation. The institutions collapsed and failed because they were manned by very poor individuals. As I said, the President of India was a poor individual. He was unfit to occupy that office. Many judges of the Supreme Court were unfit to occupy that office. Take, for instance, in 1973, you see, Mrs. Gandhi, after 1969, was in the grip of a cabal led by some communists like Mohan Kumar Mangalam and Nurul Hasan. Mr. D.P. Tripathi is here. He was the student of the JNU, which fought against the emergency. But JNU fought for the destruction of India. And the person who established the JNU was Nurul Hasan. Nurul Hasan. And one, P.N. Aksar was the brain, and the man who implemented it was Nurul Hasan, education minister. The deal between the communists and Mrs. Gandhi was JNU should be established and handed over to us. You see the far-reaching plan to disrupt India, intellectually disrupt India. And the other was Kumar Mangalam. You may not have known, Kumar Mangalam was the man who drafted the partition resolution of the Muslim League. He was the man who was drafted into working with, in fact, I tell you, Rangarajan Kumar Mangalam, his son, was a very great person, and he was my friend. I have great love for him. But that doesn't mean I should not talk about what Mohan Kumar Mangalam did. Mohan Kumar Mangalam brought in the Article 24 and 25, the Constitution Amendment 24 and 25, saying that the fundamental rights can be overridden by what is known as the directive principles. Directive principles are desires established, expressed by the founders of the Constitution. Fundamental rights belong to the people. But they made the Constitution stand upside down by making the directive principles supersede the Constitution. And this was questioned in the Supreme Court. And in the Keshavananda Bharati case in 1973, 7 judges said this amendment is not correct because it alters or abridges the basic structure of the Constitution. The very day the judgment was delivered, 3 of the judges who were responsible for this judgment were superseded, and one was K.S. Hegde. And A.N. Ray, who was made the Chief Justice, he could not later explain that he accepted to be the Chief Justice after 3 seniors were overruled. At the time, he said, I had only 2 hours to decide, and I didn't know how to decide. How he was lying, I'm going to say with reference to a book written by an American author who interviewed some 66 judges of the Supreme Court as to what was happening in the court, and particularly with reference to what A.N. Ray was saying. Justice Ray's appointment, why I am mentioning this is, the Supreme Court was subordinated in 1973. The Supreme Court would have no guts to stand up to Indira Gandhi. That Indira Gandhi knew. And it was her misfortune that this judgment of the Allahabad High Court came in June when Krishna Iyer happened to be the vacation judge. If they had anticipated that, Krishna Iyer would not have been made the vacation judge. And some courageous, honest people still survive, and normally they don't get to do this, but Krishna Iyer got the responsibility to do that, and he did it. So, Ray's appointment by the then Indira Gandhi regime, superseding the three senior judges of the Supreme Court, was viewed as an attack on the independence of the judiciary. This appointment was made on such and such date, on 7-6 verdict, which I told you. While A.N. Ray was among the 6 dissenting judges, that is, those who opposed the majority judgment which said Constitution cannot be amended at will, there are certain basic structures, basic features of the Constitution which you have to respect while amending the Constitution. Justice Ray was one of the persons who said you can amend the Constitution without any restraint. He was in that group. Justice Shalott, Hegde and Grover, whom he had superseded, were on the side of the majority. But Ray's statement that he was given 2 hours to decide to accept the post of Chief Justice was challenged by Justices Hegde and Jagmohan Reddy, who said Ray knew long before that he would take over as Chief Justice, and where it happened is important. That where Justice Ray came to know that he would become the Chief Justice, and through whom. In fact, at a dinner held by the Russian ambassador a week before supersession, Jagmohan Reddy and his wife had heard the Cabinet Minister for Steel and Mines, Mohan Kumar Mangalam, congratulate Ray on his impending appointment as Chief Justice. It happened where? In Russian ambassador's dinner. It's not one of those rare instances where the Russians were involved. You must read the Mitrokhin papers. It's a very large volume in which graphic detail had been given as to how the Indian system, Indian establishment, Indian parliamentarians, Indian media had been penetrated by KGB, by money, by influence, by positions, by travels, by importance, by projection. And that paper itself says there is a competition between us and CIA, and both of us were penetrating. And so in India, whether it is a civil servant or judge or anybody, had some kind of association with any of these groups, and you must understand how many would have stood by India. So these were all happening ahead of the emergency. It's not that emergency could come just like that. A cabinet secretary could have stopped the emergency. A home secretary could have resigned. I don't want to implement the emergency. If the Supreme Court, 5 judges had said emergency is wrong, emergency would have gone. They praised the emergency. Somebody said maternal care. And one person who became the Chief Justice for the next 5 years or 7 years, he said, I see diamond hot and diamond bright future for India, and these people are unnecessarily running down this country. You can understand to what extent the English educated Indian who is pursuing career can let down the country. And it is only the ordinary farmer, the villager, the uneducated fellow. At that time, the literacy rate in India was far less than maybe half of what it is today. They stood up and ensured that there can be no emergency at all in this country. Once and for all, the Janta rule, whether it did anything else or not, whether it failed or succeeded, it ensured that the Constitution can never be perverted by any dictator hereafter. The lesson of emergency is, the story of emergency is one thing, the lessons of emergency is another. I will tell you 1 or 2 instances of how the emergency situation developed. When I told you about this, the Congress split, and then slowly the domination of the Supreme Court by the government, by the ruling party, and then appointing the judges of their choice, there's those who will be biased and in their favor. And nationalization not as an economic program, but as a political ideology. To say that we are all for poor and anyone who opposes this is for the rich, and CIA agents. We were all called once CIA agents because we opposed all this. Everyone was branded. And everybody was thrown on the defensive. And nobody wants to face this kind of calumny. These things had developed much, much, much ahead of emergency. So, I was a chartered accountant attached to the Indian Express. I was doing the auditing of their books. When suddenly I saw, I think somewhat in the month of April or so, April 1974. So the Bihar movement was enveloping into a big movement. So Ramnath Goenka, Jayaprakash Narayan, Nanaji Deshmukh, Achyut Patwardhan, Ramdari Singh Dinkar. You must have heard about Ramdari Singh Dinkar. He was a great poet, a great friend of the Nehru family, and was a great friend of Indira Gandhi also. So all five entered, and suddenly I was in the guest house of the Indian Express. I was asked to vacate and go outside because they were all going to sit and discuss. The 3 hours they are going to be here. Till then you sit outside. So I was sitting in the veranda outside so that I could listen to all that they were talking. So they were all persuading Jayaprakash Narayan, you must somehow head the Bihar movement, you must lead the movement. Jayaprakash said, I am not going to live for long. I know what's happening is wrong, but I don't want to lead the movement because I will die. I am not going to live for long. I get up 20 times in the night. My prostate is in poor condition. My health is in poor condition. So I will not live, so don't trouble me. Ask somebody else to lead. So Ramnath Goenka says, I will set right in Vellore hospital, I will have you treated and all that. Then Ramdari Singh Dinkar was saying that you are born to do this is your last contribution. Even if you die in the process, you must launch the agitation. Then Nanaji Deshmukh said that, what are you going to live for? 6 months you are going to live for? Start the agitation and die. This is the kind of talk. I was listening to all this at that time. That's all I knew. Afterwards, all of them said, we could not find any answer. Let us all go to Tirupati. So, all the old men went to Tirupati. I never knew what happened later. But Nanaji Deshmukh told me, in Tirupati, Ramdari Singh Dinkar prayed to Lord Balaji, give the remaining years of my life to Jayaprakash. And they all went to Chennai. In Ramnath Goenka's house, Ramdari Singh Dinkar died on the lap of Jayaprakash Narayan. So Jayaprakash felt that he had a divine mandate to fight. See how things, if Jayaprakash had not led the Bihar movement, there would have been no Bihar movement. There would have been no foundation for emergency. The most important thing is not Balaji or going to the temple. Ramdari Singh Dinkar's prayer that give the remaining years of my life to Jayaprakash Narayan so that he can fight and lead this movement. Can we find such people in public life today? Who will pray to God, please give my remaining years of life to a person more useful than me? This is the spirit which made the fight against emergency possible. Now, you come to what happened during the emergency. That is graphically and beautifully explained. I can go nowhere near it because he has been swimming in it for the last 40 years. So I will go nowhere near what Surya did. But I can tell a few things about how the collapse of different institutions, apart from the fact the parliament was invaded by destroying and removing the opposition parliament, the ruling party was crushed by arresting the ruling party members. It is not that it was a fight between ruling party and the opposition. Just like Kishore Kumar's films are banned and the entire film industry crawls before you, the way you treat 4 members of the leaders of the ruling party will make the ruling party crawl before you. You choose Ramnath Goenka and statesmen in the newspapers to finish them. The rest of the media falls before you. As Advani ji said, when you are asked to bend, you are willing to crawl. This was the state of the media. See, every institution which claims to be very mighty and powerful and important and their freedom is important, where did you fight for that freedom when that freedom was taken away or threatened? All this entire media today is a bunkum. I have been part of the media for 40 years. Today, if there is a pre-censorship, the entire media will obey, I can tell you. Because there is no Ramnath Goenka to fight. There is no C.R. Irani to fight. It is individuals who fight, not institutions. In Indian Express at that time, Salaries were delayed for 3 months. People voluntarily cut their salary by 25%. People used to, instead of going by scooters, people used to go by cycles. People gave up their cars. This is what made the Indian Express fight. I was part of that battle. I was very happy. You know what happened? The government imposed 6 nominees on the board of directors of Indian Express when Ramnath Goenka had a heart attack. And as soon as Ramnath Goenka came back, that was the first consultation he had with me what to do. I said they can all be removed in the ensuing general meeting because 100% of the shares are with you. At the time, he had a meeting with, at the instance of the KK Birla was made the chairman of the board of directors, and most importantly, Kamal Nath was made one of the directors. He was about 28 or 29 at that time. Kamal Nath was one of the directors of Indian Express at that time. A.K. Antony was one, and a few others. So, when V.C. Shukla had called a meeting and told Ramnath Goenka, and KK Birla was also sitting there, he said, unless you make the 6 directors nominated by us as permanent directors, Ramnath Goenka asked him, what will you do? I will arrest you, your son, your daughter-in-law under MISA today. Then Ramnath Goenka stood up and opened the door so that everybody could listen to what he was going to say. If you are born of my friend Ravi Shankar Shukla, you will do it today. And he walked out. At the peak of emergency, he told him, if you are born of my friend Ravi Shankar Shukla, because Ramnath Goenka's relationships were at that level. So all the people in the Information Broadcasting Ministry heard what Ramnath Goenka was saying. So he went there, and then KK Birla met to GD Birla and said, Satyanash kiya hai, hum arrest ho rahe hain aaj, kuch nahi hai, there is no law, there is no court. What are we going to do? Ramnath Goenka had a strategy to tackle this. Because there were some secret correspondence of Mrs. Gandhi, about Mrs. Gandhi. Feroz Gandhi was an employee of Indian Express in 1952. He was the managing director. Ramnath Goenka used to tell Jawaharlal, my dear Jawaharlal, I hardly can agree with you. This was the kind of relationship he had with them. So, he had called one person, I told the name of the person I don't want to say. He was the person who really advised on the emergency laws from Tamil Nadu. He called him and told him, my correspondent B.K. Tiwari has all this correspondence about Mrs. Gandhi. And if anything happens to us, these things will be printed in London Times or whatever. I don't want the dirty linen of our country to be washed in public abroad. So I may be arrested, but I don't want this to happen. I have given a letter to you. You go and meet B.K. Tiwari and see that this publication doesn't take place if you are arrested. That gentleman did not go to B.K. Tiwari. He went to Mrs. Gandhi and said something is going to happen. Please don't arrest these people. And so I saw an order with my own eyes, Mrs. Gandhi saying, short of arresting them under MISA, you do anything. This is how battles are fought. You know, these are all the people who saved India. Not people who sit in air-conditioned room, go in car, speak in good meetings, and give lectures, and pontificate on the maternal treatment that is being given in jail. You can understand what is the kind of elite and intellectuals we have produced in this country. It's a disaster. So, coming to the lessons of emergency. We need towering people in every field. Institutions unmanned by towering people are of no use. Mere institutions, we respect the court because we have to respect it. That should not be the state of the court. Ultimately, of course, you have to work with everybody. When it comes to the line drawn beyond which you should not go, the court must be willing to say you are wrong. The president must be willing to say you are wrong. The civil servant must be willing to say you are wrong. The media must be willing to say you are wrong. Unless this happens, any institutional mechanism you put to ensure that the emergency is not repeated will not happen. But one thing has definitely happened. There can be no emergency in India within the Constitution of India. Unless the Constitution is overthrown, the kind of emergency which was imposed in 1975 cannot be imposed in this country. The Shah Commission report, which was destroyed, is one of the finest documents. It has to be made part of every library, every college, every school. In fact, Ira Cherian, who fought the emergency in Parliament, he came and told me that when I wrote to the government for a copy of the Shah Commission report, they said Shah Commission report is not available. He had one copy. We reprinted 5,000 copies in Chennai and ensured that Shah Commission will remain, because unless Shah Commission report remains for the people to read what democracy means, what its loss means, will never be clear. And so, once, Delhi is the place which was first initially worst affected by emergency. In Delhi, I would like a debate on Shah Commission report. If that can be arranged, that would be, in fact, in which the judges must be called. You also speak. Let them speak. What will they speak? Let us see. Get the best senior lawyers who are making 30 lakhs a day. Call them to speak. Let them refuse to speak. But at least tell them we called them to speak. They are refusing to speak. At least shame them. We must make Shah Commission a living document. It's one of the finest documents produced by an honest judge, and so that should remain. So with this, I will conclude with what is democracy in India, why democracy in India can never be destroyed. There is a philosophy of democracy in operation in this country. It is not because of votes, it's not because of parliament, it's not because of parliament members. It is because of the inherent position, philosophic position in the DNA of India, which I happened to explain in a seminar in Japan. Mr. Gupta was also there. When they asked the most frequently asked question about India, as to how India, which has such diversity, is able to work with a democracy. I said, I am surprised by this question, that diversity and democracy are contradictory. I said, democracy is needed only in a society of diversity. If it is a monogamous society, the fight is between two persons. Whether it is Abdullah or Ibrahim who should be the president, or Edward or Robert who should be the president, that is not our democracy. Our democracy is a clash of ideas. And what is the claim? We are able to withstand harmonization of total contradictions. So I cited 3 instances. How in our DNA this democratic spirit is there. Rama is revered because he worshipped his father, he obeyed his father. Prahlada is revered because he defied his father. Sita is revered because she obeyed her husband. Meera is worshipped because he defied her husband. Lakshmana is respected because he obeyed his brother. Vibhishana is revered in the same way. In fact, in the Vaishnava tradition, he is regarded as one of the manifestations of the devotees. And he is respected because he defied his brother. I said we can happily marry contradictions. And that is what makes democracy workable in India. Huh? Okay, so we must understand that all this we must educate the people on. It is not vote-based democracy, it is culturally we are ingrained in the democratic spirit. And that is what made the ordinary Indian fight emergency, not the man who had read the constitution, who knew the Supreme Court, or who knew how the parliament functions, or who even read the newspaper. It is not that man who fought and won against the dictatorship which was imposed in 1975, but it is the ordinary Indian. The credit goes to him. Thank you very much.